at it as well, internalizing the GPY argument, working day and night. And so the average is 14 over 21, or about 0.67 primes per location.
Now, in this case, where we checked every spot by hand, we could see that the stencil caught several positions with 2 primes in them. But the averaging machine doesn't tell us this. All that spits out is an average, and that average alone can't guarantee that it caught 2 primes at once. Because you could just as well imagine spreading all of these 14 primes over 14 individual positions.
And the same would be true if the average was 0.8, 0.9, or even 1. I know it's unlikely, but it could be that every position only caught 1 prime to bring the average to 1.
But what if the average was larger than 1? What if we found 22 primes in total?
Well, even if every position had caught 1 prime, you would still have 1 prime left over, and that needs to go in one of those other positions. So, in other words, if the average is above 1, then that guarantees that at least 1 position caught 2 primes.
And so that's the game. Get the average number of primes above 1. But that still leaves one question. Even if you could do that, then how does that help you prove that you keep getting bounded gaps all the way up to infinity? Well, remember, you just proved it for any large number x. So there's nothing stopping you from replacing that x with 2x and that 2x with 4x. And then you could replace the 2x with 4x and the 4x with 8x and so on, all the way up to infinity. So if you can prove that the average gap is above 1 for any large number x, then with this clever setup, it immediately extends all the way out to infinity, and you would have proven your bounded gap.
Unfortunately, running the machine with just the current inputs, the stencil visits many positions where it catches 0 primes. This drags the average down and means it will never get above 1. So GPY made one final tweak to their machine. They realized that some starting positions are more likely to catch primes than others. For example, if the stencil only lands on even numbers, it will always give 0 primes unless it includes 2, so those positions should not be weighted equally to the others. Similarly, if you can divide one or more of the numbers in the stencil by 3, 5, 7, or other small prime factors, it's also more unlikely you have primes in your stencil, so they should also be weighted less. Now, GPY did a few simple checks like this for each position to assign it a weight, an estimate of how likely it is that this position contains primes. This turned their averaging machine into a weighted averaging machine. And as a result, that weighted average shot up. With their updated machine, they proved that if you pick any large number x, then in the range x to 2x, you could get the weighted average arbitrarily close to 1, but not above 1. They were close, but they ran into a wall. A wall that came from their weights. Because to figure out how to weigh different positions, they needed to know how primes are distributed in something known as an arithmetic progression. These are basically just series of numbers where they're all the same step size apart. So 3, 7, 11, 15, that's an arithmetic progression with a step size of 4. Now, GPY needed to know how primes were distributed over many such arithmetic progressions, with all kinds of different step sizes. Fortunately, they knew of a theorem from the 1960s they could use to do exactly this.
It's the substitute for the Riemann hypothesis, on average. And it turns out that that's what's actually necessary in a lot of these arithmetic applications.
But that theorem doesn't work everywhere. It only works for step sizes up to the square root of x, or x to the 1/2. The technical term for this 1/2 is the level of distribution, or theta. It tells you how large the step sizes can be while still getting a reliable count of primes in those progressions. And mathematicians believed that the theorem worked beyond x to the 1/2, but this was never proven. And that is where the trouble lies. When GPY ran their calculation with this ceiling, they found the maximum weighted average they could get was 2 times theta. In other words, they got really close to 1, but they could never actually cross it.
They showed in their method that if you could get beyond 1/2, you could do 0.5000001, then instead of just getting 0% of the average gap, they can get bounded gaps. The primes would be some fixed distance apart.
That's what the 2005 meeting was all about. They kept trying to push past that 1/2 barrier, but they ended up concluding that it was impossible.
From 2010 on, Zhang spent 2 years hacking away at it as well, internalizing the GPY argument, working day and night just to try and find a way through. But by the summer of 2012, Zhang was exhausted and had nothing to show for it. Hoping to clear his head, he visited a friend in Colorado, where one evening, while they were waiting to leave for a concert, Zhang stepped outside alone into the backyard, looking out for the deer that usually roamed the property, but no deer came. So he was just walking and thinking, when all of a sudden, the answer came to him. He hadn't brought any notes or paper, but Zhang believed his idea would work.
See, GPY had to count primes in many different arithmetic progressions with all sorts of step sizes. But Zhang focused on a special class of step sizes, ones built only from small prime factors, and he realized he could reorganize the error terms into a form where most of them get cancelled out. This allowed him to push past the half barrier by a tiny fraction, just 1/584. Zhang spent the next year finalizing his proof. And then, on the 17th of April 2013, he sent off that curious email to the Annals of Mathematics.
Now, the Annals gets a proof of the Riemann hypothesis every other day. So they're like, okay, surely this isn't going to work out, but whatever, we'll send it to a referee. And they're like, well, let's spend a few hours this afternoon. We'll find a mistake. We'll tell the Annals, sorry, it didn't work out. Here's where the gap is. And they start reading it. And then they flip back, because they're experts, so they can just flip through like, yeah, this will work, but wait a second, you're going to get stuck here. And they flip 5 pages and they're like, oh, that's interesting. That's how you're going to handle that. Okay, but then you're going to have another, it's like trying to lay down a carpet in a room. You're like, okay, I know that corner. That corner is going to screw you up, even if you manage to make it work over there. And then he goes over there. No, he cut it just right. It fits in that corner. Wait a second. And then they flip, 5 more pages. And by the end of the week, they've reconstructed the proof, and everything's right.
Wow.
Zhang's stencil had 3.5 million slots spread across a span of 70 million. And by proving 2 of those slots always catch primes, he proved a bounded gap of 70 million. When the news broke, mathematicians were in disbelief.
It was basically an unknown in the field. I actually thought, when I started reading Yitang Zhang's paper and started realizing it was probably correct, I thought it was probably one of the people I knew under a pseudonym, trying to avoid being embarrassed by being wrong, if they were wrong.
Of course, it wasn't. Zhang was real. And just over a year later, he was awarded the MacArthur Genius Grant.
To me, this is a really interesting aspect of mathematics in particular. I think it's one of the very few fields where we have a truly honest approach to success and what counts as success. He sent in an argument. People took it seriously. They looked at it. They didn't think that he had a true proof. They sat there. They gave him the time that the argument was due, and he was immediately made a hero, as he should have been. To me, it shows that mathematics culture works. We're doing the right thing. I think the cover of Scientific American or whatever in 2013 is the story of Yitang Zhang and how he got this bounded gaps between primes, toiling in complete isolation. And maybe it's because he was in isolation that he didn't have the groupthink that the rest of us did to know that this was not, we were all told it's an impossible problem.
After realizing a bounded gap was not an impossible dream, people reworked Zhang's method to optimize it. Terence Tao spearheaded an online group called Polymath, and they sharpened the method. So every month, week, or day, that upper bound kept coming down. One of the attendees described being at a conference at the time as, I remember sort of day by day, everyone was refreshing their screens to see who had the world record now. And ultimately, they got the number all the way down to 4,680.
Meanwhile, there's a young postdoc named James Maynard, who just got his PhD at Oxford, with Roger Heath Brown, another one of these analytic number theory world experts. And he's working with Andrew Granville in Montreal. And he has a completely orthogonal approach to this problem that he'd been making some very incremental progress on independently.
When Maynard started, his advisor explicitly told him, "I hope you won't work on this problem full time, because I'm really pretty confident you're going to fail." But Maynard ignored the warning and came up with a different way to attack the problem. And within just a few months, he got it to work, further bringing down the gap to 600.
But his method also proved something else.
He can get 3 primes in a bounded window. The bound has to change depending on how many primes you want to put in that window. And that his number is better. And the method has nothing to do with the exponent 1/2.
Wait, what?
1/2 was a pure mirage. It was a red herring.
That is crazy. 1/2 was not a fundamental limit at all.
See, where GPY's average was stuck at 2 times theta, Maynard's average grew roughly like theta over 2 times the natural logarithm of k, where k is the number of slots in the stencil. So all Maynard needed was enough slots, and it worked.
You need any number greater than 0. When you go up to 1/2, because you have 1/2, you'll get better numerics. But the bounded gaps you could do just going up to, 0.01, not 0.5001. Now, curiously, Terry Tao independently has the same approach. He tells Ben Green about it. Ben Green is meeting with Andrew Granville and says, "Hey, Terry's got this new idea that he thinks is going to get even farther." And Granville says, "Wait a second, my postdoc Maynard is doing exactly the same thing. We got to get these 2 guys to talk to one another." Terry's a Fields medalist. He's like a super heavyweight by this point, whereas James is this, fresh PhD. And Terry says, "You take it. I don't need this. It's your idea. You go with it."
By early 2014, Maynard joined forces with Tao's polymath group.
It was clear that somehow 600 was just a proof of concept, and the same methods would give something smaller, but there were extra ideas that you could maybe use to squeeze everything out. And so the current world record is that there's infinitely many pairs of primes that differ by no more than 246.
And that, for now, is where it stops.
In 2022, James Maynard was awarded the Fields Medal, mathematics' highest honor, for his work on prime gaps.
Yeah, I think that's the basic outline, is the kind of two directions of approximation to twin primes, Chen's direction, Brun, Chen, whatever, versus Zhang and Maynard, and this story that Zhang wasn't at this meeting, so he didn't know it was impossible.
It reminded me of the 4-minute mile, where everyone thought it was impossible, no one did it.
And then for the first time ever, Roger Bannister broke it in 1954. And after knowing it was possible, just 46 days later, another runner called John D. Landy broke it as well. And by the end of 1956, 10 people had broken it, all from knowing that it was possible.
So what about pushing that gap down even lower? Is that possible? Well, mathematicians have found ways to bring it down even more. But all of these results are conditional.
For example, there is the Elliott-Halberstam conjecture, which assumes primes are spread evenly across arithmetic progressions, or that the level of distribution can be taken as large as 1. And in 2013, Maynard showed that if you assume this conjecture is true, then the gap plummets to just 12. A year later, the polymath group proved that if you assume an even stronger version of this conjecture, the gap drops all the way down to 6. But without assuming anything, 246 still stands.
Let me ask you, do you think we're going to solve the twin prime conjecture?
I'm totally convinced that humanity will eventually solve the twin prime conjecture. Often when I'm asked about some of these big famous problems like twin primes or Riemann or something like that, one way of kind of avoiding the question is that if you imagine you're randomly distributed in time, you'd expect to be sort of typically roughly halfway through when the conjecture's been open for. So a natural guess, if you have no other information, is to guess that a problem will be open for as long as it has been open for already. But obviously this doesn't work for twin primes because we don't know whether it's
right.
175 years old or whether it's like 2,000 years old. So I think it's a fool's game to guess, but it clearly needs a really big idea, but maybe it only needs one big idea.
Although maybe, just maybe, not knowing this with certainty is for the best. Because if we knew for sure that this was impossible, then we would have likely missed out on most of these inventions and new methods over the past century.